Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. Okay, so I know technically there are no skinwalkers in Michigan, but the other night around 3 in the morning I was walking down the road and saw this herd of deer running across the road, and then right behind them, this thing came out of the woods. It was big, like a deer size, but its head was not on its neck. It was on its shoulders, and was way too big to be a coyote or a dog. It ran under the light, and I could see it was colored dark black, like its skin was black. And I say skin because this creature looked almost leathery, not anything like it was furry. It also cleared the main road in about 2 steps, just boom, boom, gone. We have no bear, no moose, no wolves, no buffalo, nothing that looks like that. And I know 100% this was not a deer. Today's second encounter, Vernon Parish, Louisiana. We were camping in an open-air tent. The camp was next to a creek called Castor Creek. Camping with me was my 2 younger cousins. At about 2 in the morning, my youngest cousin, who was 15, was awakened by the sound of something moving around the campsite. When he awoke and realized he was looking at, he screamed and woke us up. What we saw was a large, hairy figure standing on 2 feet. The height was between 6 and 7 feet tall. This creature was moving from one side of the tent area to the wooded area side. At no time did the creature make any moves to harm or intimidate us. Once the creature was on the wooded side of the tent area, it stopped moving for 5 to 10 seconds and looked back at us. Then the creature just walked into the woods and out of sight. The smell smelled like 100 rotten eggs. It also definitely stood between 6 and 7 feet tall and weighed, I don't know, 300, 400 pounds. We did notice that during the time of the encounter there were no sounds in the woods. The sounds returned after this creature left. At 5:45 in the morning, we all packed up and left that area. Today's third encounter. I'm not sure how to begin this. Whatever this is, it didn't just affect me, but my family in different ways. And it continued to mess with me for years after we moved from the house where it all started. I'm trying to take something that did many things over several years and just trim it down to details that seem important. And I'm sorry if it reads as weird or awkward. My grandmother was supposed to have traced her side of the family all the way back to an unregistered family of natives that escaped the Trail of Tears. And after telling a person of this strange thing that I normally kept secret, they suggested that it might be a skinwalker. But I don't know. I know that there was a lot of family strife in that house where the haunting started that bubbled to the surface. A spirit there liked to scare me by calling my name, slamming doors, giving me strange nightmares, and even mimicking the voices of family to other members. The first time I can think of it appearing is when we were coming back from a road trip at night. Dad was driving, and he hits the brakes hard and swerves because he had seen a wolf with no eyes step out into our lane and look at our oncoming car. Because everyone else was asleep, he was the only one to see it, and there was no body around to suggest that anything had physically been there. The second time I think it showed itself was many years after. We had long moved from the house this all started in. I was home alone at night messaging a friend, and I saw a huge figure walking up the road. I froze in fear as it approached and eventually passed by the house we were living in. And what I remember was something with a strange skull, kind of like a vervet monkey skull, as a head or covering its head, and the rest completely hidden behind a cloak of some sort or dark-colored fur. It hasn't been around now for a bit, but while it was around or possibly pursuing me, it had caused a lot of hardship for me and my family. I remember that if I talked or thought about it too much, it would draw its attention back to me when it seemed like it had just left, and would have let my guard down. Whatever it was always made me feel terrified and unsafe. I used to have symbols of protection from whatever religion I could think of to try to find some sort of protection from it. I'm not sure what this entity is, but this is not a story I share much as I know how it sounds, and I don't want to go through the normal ridicule and dismissive comments. An unknown entity that appears as a wolf with no eyes or a fur-cloaked humanoid with a vervet-like skull that causes hardship, nightmares, feelings of terror, and can mimic voices. Today's fourth encounter, Newton, Texas. I was driving from Beaumont to Louisiana. I was on Highway 87 going into Bleakwood, a community near Kirbyville. At about 2 in the morning, I was driving about 60 miles an hour. I saw a figure moving on the road ahead. A very large, furry, human-shaped creature stopped, turned, and looked toward the lights. Then turned and walked into the trees. I was terrified. I slammed on the brakes, and my small car spun completely around. I got the car straight and kept going. I've told only a few people about this incident. My sister said it must have been a bear, but it was no bear. It was a light golden brown with slightly darker areas on some of the fur. The face was flat like a human, not a pointed nose like a bear. It was larger than a normal human. I recently saw a mention of sightings in East Texas while I was searching for wild animals of East Texas. Since I recently moved to this area and see and hear a lot of coyote and unknown smaller wildlife out here in the country, so thought maybe these folks won't think I'm crazy. I really did see this creature. It was light golden brown with slightly darker areas on some of the hair. The face was flat like a human, not a pointed nose like a bear, and it was larger than a normal human. Today's fifth encounter, Rains County, Texas. I have never forgotten the experience my friends and I had one night while attempting to spend the night on the shore of Lake Taakoni. I was about 16 or 17 at the time, and it was midsummer. The lake level had dropped enough to provide a large shoreline that we would make a bonfire on and ride our motorcycles, etc. We lived on about 20 acres of lakefront property. After setting up tents and starting a large campfire, we generally goofed off and told stories until we had adequately freaked ourselves out and went back to the house to calm down and regained our braveness. Sometime after midnight, we decided none of us had the guts to sleep in the tents. So we all got flashlights and made our way back down to the lake to put out the fire. As we came in with 100 yards of our tents, we heard a distinct sound of someone inside of the tent moving around very aggressively. You know that sound you make when you rub against the nylon fabric of a tent. Thinking it was some other friends trying to scare us, we all trained our flashlights on the tent that was moving around, and as we walked closer, began to yell threats to whoever was in there. The campfire we had made had burned down to a red-orange glow. We all were very nervous, and the hairs on my body were standing on end. Something was not right, and we all felt it. As we got within 50 yards of our tent, a figure came out of the tent and trotted off from our left to right with the campfire between us and it. To this day, I can see this creature in my mind's eye very clearly. I believe it was a young Sasquatch. I now know this, not then. That was around 5.5 to 6 feet tall. That's a guess on my part, as I'm 6'4". It had a very pronounced slump in the head and shoulder area, with little to no neck, and hair all over the body that was not dense. The hair seemed to average about 1 to 2 inches tall, and was standing mostly straight up versus lying down, much like a young orangutan. I remember it having very long arms and a very muscular body. I'm guessing it was a teenaged Sasquatch that was trying to find something in our tent to eat or steal. Needless to say, we all stood motionless for a few seconds as the creature disappeared into the dark woods. Then we all broke the sound barrier as we took back off to the house. We all stayed pretty silent the rest of the night and went to sleep in my bedroom. After everyone had gone home that next morning, I rode my dirt bike down to the campsite to clean everything up. As I shut off my bike, I had a very strong feeling of being watched, and after just a few minutes, couldn't take it anymore and started towards my bike. As I was getting on, I heard a very loud and very deep grunt, the likes of which I had never heard before or since. It put fear in me that, as I type this, is giving me goosebumps. I put my bike in gear and took off, like a scalded cat, back to the main house. After explaining everything to my dad and seeing my face pale, he got a shotgun and we both walked down. When we got there, the terrible feeling of being watched was gone, and it was if everything was normal. We poked around and didn't see anything. To this day, I wonder why we didn't look for prints in the dried clay of the shoreline, but I guess we just didn't know any better. I've never told anyone this story because I thought I was crazy for seeing what I believed to be a young Sasquatch in Lake Tawakoni area. But I see, time to time, people talking about these things everywhere. Today's sixth encounter is a subscriber submission. In 2011 in Rosemont, Illinois, I worked for a nonprofit agency that provided case management services to teens at risk. I got a call that this youth was in crisis. I drove to the family's apartment in Rosemont. I had pulled into the apartment complex, and at the other side of the street was a parked bus, no lights or stop out, so I proceeded slowly. Well, parked in the area was a police unit, and the next thing I know, I'm being tagged as to pull into the parking lot. I rolled my window down and waited for the officer. When the officer approached, he asked for my papers. I got snippy and said, "Excuse me?" See, I'm Mexican-American, and I'm brown as we come. Anyway, he then removed his sunglasses, and as he asked for my license and insurance, his eyes shifted. They blinked vertically, and his eyes looked like those of a lizard. I had my license and insurance at hand and slowly gave it to him as I still was trying to process what I had just seen. He reached for the documents as smirked and inhaled deeply as if he sniffed and inhaled. He then walked away, and in a few seconds he was gone. I doubted myself and questioned what I had just witnessed. I told myself when he comes back his eyes will be normal. I'm just stressed and I'm seeing things. He came back, gave me a ticket saying I didn't stop for the bus, and all I could do was stare at his eyes. His eyes shifted between human eyes and green lizard-like eyes, and when they became lizard eyes, an almost clear-like second eyelid closed vertically. I sat there in shock as he smirked, giving me the ticket. He left and sat there in shock for a few more seconds, and then I snapped out of my trance and went on about my business. This took my mind off what I'd just experienced, until, again, I was on my way home. I told my husband, and he said, "You're crazy." I later went to court to dispute the ticket, hoping to see the officer and show my husband. The officer didn't show, and the court was moved 3 times. At this, I got a lawyer. See, in Illinois, if an officer had issued the ticket is not at court, then the ticket is dismissed. Well, the judge did not want to dismiss it, so by the 3rd time, with a lawyer, I was given a small fine and the ticket not shown on my record. Well, that officer never showed. But my question is reptilians attracted or repulsed by certain blood types, or people with certain medical conditions? I'm diabetic, and I was overweight at the time. Well, instantly after reading this encounter, I was instantly brought to Donald Coleman Jr. Now, he's been on 3 times. The second time he was on, a lot of people gave me crap for it because he proceeded to talk about his medical condition for about 9 minutes. But the reason why he did was because his belief is that these creatures, not only reptilians, but Sasquatch, Dogman, werewolf, whatever, shapeshifter, crawler, whatever the hell is out there, he believes 100% that these things are attracted to certain blood types, certain people with illnesses. He also had an encounter with a reptilian as well. So, just a thought. Today's 7th encounter. My mom and dad had gone to town to pick up a pizza for supper. On their way back home, they were approaching the S corner on 1461, north of Highway 380, and saw a large light brown colored figure cross the road. The figure was standing upright and was moving very fast across the road. They were very startled at what they had just seen. They traveled about 50 yards past the figure and looked at each other. My mother asked my dad if he just saw what she saw, and he replied that he did. My mother then stated that she believes that was a Bigfoot, and my father agreed. They claimed that the figure was in a hurry to climb a hill and get over the fence that was on the west side of the road, and that the figure made long strides as it moved across the road. My mother and father came home with the pizza, and I could tell they were shaken up by their experience. My dad told me about what they had seen, so we grabbed our rifles and flashlights and went back to where the figure was spotted. We searched the road ditches and fence lines. I remember seeing a large cedar tree which had grown through the barbed wire fence. This cedar tree had a large branch that was about 3 inches in diameter, and had been snapped in a downward position at the trunk of the tree. I must say that we did not look for things that we should have, like footprints or hair on the fence, but it was a nerve-wracking evening. If I had to do it all over again, I would have spent more time looking for clues. I'm writing this for my mom. Today's 8th encounter takes place in southeast Michigan. A few nights ago, at around 2:30 in the morning, I decided to head into the kitchen, as a late-night snack sounded rather appealing. Upon going in, I looked out the window and noticed a coyote sitting in my driveway. My initial thought was that this is indeed a coyote, as there has been an increasing number in the area. Not long after I began looking at this coyote, it stood up on its hind legs and ran off. I never saw it again after. Today's ninth encounter, Hunt County, Texas. Me and my dad were traveling north on CR 1019 and crossed the South Sulphur River Bridge. And I thought I saw a car light coming over the railroad tracks about a half a mile ahead. Then, as I got closer, I found that it was not car lights. It was my headlights reflecting off of something standing beside the road ahead. As I got closer, I could see that it was some type of big animal standing upright beside the road. I could see that it had long silver and white hair. That is why my headlights were reflecting off of it. The animal started to move from the left side to the right side of the road as I got closer. I was about 50 feet from the animal when it crossed the road to the right. It stood as tall as a cow would if a cow could stand straight up. The animal then started to move out of my headlights and went over the fence and disappeared into a nearby field. I was too scared to stop and look into the field, and my dad said that we needed to get out of there, and now. I had never seen it again, but I have been raccoon hunting in that area many times, and on different occasions my hunting dogs refused to leave the truck. Or sometimes they would leave and come back quickly and stay at the truck like they were really scared of something. These dogs are very aggressive hunters. I have a couple of friends who saw some sort of large animal a week or so after I saw it as well. Today's 10th encounter. I don't know what I saw at it. Cindy was my best friend at the time, so she came with me to the new house. Sorry for the bad formatting as I'm on my mobile. I've never shared my story as I'm not sure what it was because I don't live anywhere near a reservation. I live in Florida. I can't think of any rational explanation for what I saw. However, for some backstory, I lived in a city near Orlando and went to school with a girl who we'll call Cindy. My mom worked at a different school nearby as a teacher. We were going to move towards Central Florida in a very rural, absolute middle-of-nowhere area after school ended. So it was Cindy and I's last day of school, but my mom still had to teach for another week. She drove us out to the new house to stay there on our own for a week while she finished work and would stay with my grandma in town. So Cindy and I are there, and we're excited to have the whole house to ourselves for a week and get to set up my room and stuff. We decided we wanted to still go on late walks like we used to and thought about going that night. We agreed we should go while it's still light out because we didn't know the area very well. All my area was a giant square-shaped road or block. It wasn't really a block, though, because any houses there were just a mailbox and a gate on the road with a driveway that went out for like half a mile until you saw a house. So we were walking on this square road around dusk, and we get to the corner of the road and go to turn and watch this absolutely massive deer walk out of one side of the road from the trees, maybe like 50 yards ahead of us. We kind of just stopped or slowed to look for a second because although I'm from up north, she'd never seen a deer being from the city, and I had never seen one up close. This thing also was a buck, and again huge, so I told her not to get close, as it could be dangerous. All this happened in like 5 seconds while it walked to the middle of the road. Then this deer stops in its tracks, turns its head to look at us, and just stared for what felt like 10 seconds realistically. We just kind of watched this deer like a staring contest. Then it turns its head forward again, stands up on its hind legs, and starts limp walking into the other side of the trees. Then we just watch the trees rustle a ton, and she goes, "Did you fucking see that?" I was like, "Yeah." And we turned around and quickly walked home. Hadn't walked the rest of the week, and my mom came home earlier than expected, so we felt better. So here's where I'm not sure of anything. This deer's legs were not what they should look like. A deer's legs are opposite of ours or a dog's. When they stand on all fours, their back knees point behind them instead of in front. This deer's legs didn't point behind them. Its knees faced forward as if they had been twisted around perfectly. My mom worked in her family's butcher shop as a kid and had seen deer brought in with ankles that were twisted and broke and healed completely in a new position. It makes sense as they can walk on 3 legs as that one heals. I can't see how this could have healed both of its legs or how they both twisted so perfectly, or especially how it would walk on those legs alone. I think the fact that its legs were backwards is why it somehow limped forwards, although it clearly didn't have any broken or twisted bones. It didn't seem to be in pain, just stumbled. It had antlers, no idea if it had ears or a tail. I hear everyone else say I won't have a tail if it was a skinwalker. I had no idea what skinwalkers were, any cryptids were at this point. All I paid attention to was its size, which had to be at least 8 feet tall standing with a slight hunch with its legs. I remember we mentioned it smelled like rotten eggs as well. I don't recall a coppery scent. It could just have been sulfur, I'm not sure. Despite looking at this thing right in the eyes, it was too far away to even see them. My horrible vision, so I can't tell you what those look like as well. I didn't look for all the telltale signs you look for in a skinwalker because, again, I'd never heard of them. I have so many questions about this experience. Why didn't it try to attack us? Why was it in the middle of Florida? Why would it almost show us it walked like that instead of, I don't know, like keeping its cool? If that's not what is what, the hell did I see? Cindy and I are no longer friends, so I'm not sure if she'd even remember. I think the only reason it stuck with me is when I heard stories about skinwalkers and I felt my heart sink into my stomach and remember this. I have a Navajo friend who refuses to speak about this with me, and I fully believe skinwalkers exist, even if it's not what I saw. I have heard of flesh gates, but I have trouble believing in other things, because they don't have Navajo ties, which my friend does and clearly believes in. I don't know much about flesh gates, except they're basically a skinwalker without Native American background. Maybe that's what I saw. Maybe this deer was just severely deformed. Well, couple things. Flesh gates are a creepypasta made up by Reddit. What you probably saw was a skinwalker, but not, because there are Native American tribes in Florida that they do have their own rendition of the skinwalker, called a shapeshifter. Once again, Navajo Indians have skinwalkers. They're the only people that use that term. That term is used specifically, was used when the Ute and Navajo were fighting over land, and they cursed the Ute. Actually, that's the reason why Skinwalker Ranch is called Skinwalker Ranch, is because that land was cursed by Navajo. More or less, I believe this person saw either some sort of shapeshifter or a deer man. There's been numerous sightings in Alberta, Canada, way far away from Florida, but you got a lot of swampland. Definitely not deformed deer, because it's just not going to get up and walk on 2 legs. So, very scary, creepy encounter, but the most fascinating point to this one is that, once again, here is Native American lore getting taken out of context by creepypastas, Reddit, creepy wiki, or whatever the hell that place is, whatever. These cultures are sacred to these tribes, and it just drives me friggin' nuts when they are used out of context, like the Wendigo, which is a huge part of my lineage on my mom's side. And it drives me frickin' bonkers. I don't know. Now I'm just rambling. Sorry. Today's 11th encounter. Little River, Arkansas. My ex-husband and I were going to watch the sunset on the Red River, south of Mena. We traveled south to DeQueen and then through Foreman to the Red River. We got there 15-20 minutes before sunset. We started home going north on Highway 41. I was driving. And just shortly after we started on the road, it started to get dark. We had come through a curve on the road when all of a sudden we saw a huge 7 to 8 foot tall figure standing on the right side of the road, on the shoulder as if it was going to cross the road in front of us. It outstretched its arms at us, and my ex-husband screamed and slid my side of the car and grabbed the steering wheel to turn left so I wouldn't hit it. I was staring at the road and then looked at him and asked, "What was that?" We both came to the conclusion that it was a Bigfoot. It had reddish-brown long hair and stood upright with very long arms. I can still see it clear as day. Tonight's 12th and final encounter, Johnson County, Arkansas. This guy was gathering ginseng root on a terrace of the hollow wall. At the time, he was not aware that he was in violation of national forest rules by gathering ginseng. He stated he has since learned the hard way that it is a violation. He had obtained several root from a particular location just 100 yards or so below the road where his vehicle was parked. He had just shaken dirt off the roots and placed them in a leg of an old pair of pants that had been sewn up at one end for that purpose. He then began to feel like someone was watching him, so he began to look around. When he looked up the slope, he saw what he thought was a man disguised in a long, open fur coat, leaning against a tree with his right shoulder. The figure was calmly watching him from about 50 yards away. He stated he thought it was someone he might have known that was messing with him. So, he said he immediately began to trot to his right to get around a rock point so that he could run up to the man's location. He stated he intended to thump his gourd when he got there. He stated that when he did arrive at the location, the figure was gone. When he looked down the slope, he saw that the figure was not a man, and that it was at the same location he was at when he first saw it. He said the animal had squatted and, using both hands, scooped up the loose dirt the witness had shaken off the ginseng root a few minutes before. The animal brought the dirt close to its nose and smelled it, then dropped it. The animal then picked up the leafy tops from the ginseng root, which the witness had discarded, smelled them, and dropped them to the ground. As the animal began to stand up, the witness said, "I got the hell out of Dodge." The witness chambered up the steep wall of the hollow to his truck and left the area. And there you have it, folks, today's bonus. I do hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. After all, it is your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone's simply treated with the respect we all deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.